In the dense pine forests of Louisiana, where the air clings to your skin and shadows stretch longer than they should, something walked among the soldiers, crawling, mimicking, watching, and then vanishing without a trace. This is the story they tried to forget, the one they refused to talk about. Until now. Welcome to your last known entry. Fort Polk, located in Vernon Parish, Louisiana, is one of the most heavily wooded military installations in the United States. Built during World War II, it has served countless roles, from basic training grounds to a live simulation environment for preparing soldiers for urban combat. But it's not just the terrain that's rough. It's what the terrain hides. Surrounded by swamps, thick forests, and miles of rural nothingness, Fort Polk sits near lands once held sacred and feared by Native American tribes. According to local Choctaw and Caddo legends, the land itself is alive and not kindly. By the early 2000s, rumors among the younger soldiers began circulating. Whispers of something, not quite animal, not quite human, watching from the brush during night patrols, crawling on all fours, mimicking. But those were just rumors. Until Alpha Unit was sent in for a night exercise, and one of them didn't come back the same. It was a standard training op. Night navigation through Sector Delta, one of the more isolated zones near the southern perimeter of the base. Alpha Unit, 8 soldiers strong, was to make contact with a checkpoint and return. Nothing complicated. Private Michael Renner was the first to report hearing it. I thought it was Staff Sergeant calling me over comms. Same exact voice, same cadence. But the radio was dead. He turned. A figure, low to the ground, was crawling between tree trunks at an inhuman speed. It stopped, halfway behind a tree, and whispered his name. Renner. Come here, come here. It wasn't the staff sergeant. He panicked and called it in, but the rest of the unit brushed it off. Stress, hallucinations, maybe even a prank. But then it mimicked someone else. Perfectly. Private First Class Gonzalez heard her own voice coming from the trees, laughing. That night, comms went haywire. GPS signals looped, compass needles spun. By 200 hours, the team was completely disoriented. Something was circling them, but the thermal scopes showed nothing. Not even heat signatures. It got worse when they set up a temporary rest point. The corporal saw it briefly. A creature, not a man, crawling along the tree line, limbs bent at impossible angles. It stood slowly and vanished into the brush. They aborted the mission. When the unit returned, half of them refused to speak about what happened. Renner was transferred within the week. One private checked himself into mental health. Another was caught pacing in his barracks at night, muttering to himself. Something had gotten under their skin, something that couldn't be filed away in a report. I was there. I saw it. Don't let anyone tell you it was stress or swamp gas. PFC Gonzalez. It used my voice, like, exactly. Even the little way I say okay when I'm nervous. How would something know that? Anonymous source. After that night, we weren't allowed back in Sector Delta. Whole area got sealed for environmental hazard monitoring. Bullshit. Former Staff Sergeant unconfirmed logs retrieved by a civilian contractor through FOIA show that several psychological evaluations were ordered that week. Internal reports note collective hallucination and shared delusional disorder. But none of the involved personnel had prior psychiatric history, and none of them were together long enough for such a phenomenon to manifest normally. It was intelligent, calculating. It wanted us to feel watched, hunted. Unit therapist, anonymized statement. The consistency in their fear wasn't just unsettling, it was uniform. clinical, like trauma imprinted by design. Base Command responded quickly, almost too quickly. Training ops in Sector Delta were suspended indefinitely. The official reason? Dangerous sinkholes. Yet no geological survey was ever released. Surveillance footage from the trail cams that week? Erased. A FOIA request filed by a military paranormal researcher revealed heavily redacted logs. Entire nights blacked out. Communications records missing. The Army has a protocol for unidentified threats. They just never expected something like this. Retired intelligence officer. 3 soldiers were quietly discharged within months. 2 relocated across the country. 1 was reported missing in 2007. Family members say he started sleepwalking, talking to himself. One night, he left his home barefoot in the rain and never returned. No trace was found, except a set of muddy footprints at the edge of the woods, and one word carved into the tree bark nearby. Listen. Locals from Vernon Parish speak quietly about what they believe the soldiers encountered. They call it a Yenaldushi, the Navajo word for skinwalker, a shape-shifting entity cursed to wander as beast and spirit. The Choctaw have a similar legend, the Nalusa Falaya, the long black being that follows travelers at night. Skeptics argue it was overtraining, mass paranoia, or audio hallucination. Others point to Fort Polk's proximity to known UFO activity zones and ley lines. Some believe it was a classified experiment gone wrong, but no such facility has ever been acknowledged. Still, the mimicry, the crawling, the psychological collapse matches other skinwalker reports from reservations in Utah and Arizona. Even cryptozoologists suggest lunar alignments, hinting at ritual over randomness. Whatever it was, it knew us, it understood us, and it wasn't scared. Former Alpha Unit soldier, since the incident, Sector Delta has remained restricted. A few urban explorers have snuck in. Most say they found nothing. But a few say they felt watched, that their voices echoed wrong. One woke up with muddy footprints inside his tent. There's no proof, just shadows. But to the soldiers of Alpha Unit, it was real. It happened. And for some, it never really ended. I still hear it in my sleep, calling my name in my own voice. Private Renner, 2015 interview. This was your last known entry.
Come back.
A voice crackles over a radio. A soldier on night patrol reports movement. No one should be here. Seconds later, surveillance cameras glitch. Then silence. At Camp Navajo, Arizona, in the early 2000s, guards began whispering about a presence. Something tall, dark, and wrong. Nestled deep in the high desert of northern Arizona, just west of Flagstaff, lies a quiet, sprawling installation known as Camp Navajo. To the untrained eye, it's nothing more than a standard Army National Guard base, a training ground surrounded by tall pines and mountain silence. But to those who've served within its fence lines, Camp Navajo holds more than just ammunition stockpiles. It holds secrets, and something else entirely. Originally constructed in 1942 during the ramp-up to World War II, Camp Navajo's 44 square miles were designed to house one thing: weapons. Underground bunkers, reinforced concrete igloos, and endless dirt access roads made it one of the most secure storage depots in the Southwest. Today, those same bunkers sit scattered across the terrain like forgotten tombs. Many of them are sealed shut, cold, silent relics of a bygone era. Others are still in use, but all of them are watched. The elevation here sits over 7,000 feet, and the cold desert air cuts sharp at night. Visibility can drop to near zero when the fog rolls in. The silence is deceptive, unnerving. And the deeper you go into the perimeter, the more that silence starts to feel intentional. It was here, amidst the isolation of military protocol and midnight patrols, that soldiers began reporting things they couldn't explain. Glimpses of something large, human-shaped, but not, moving without sound, watching from the tree line, sometimes appearing near sealed bunkers no one had access to. This wasn't folklore. This was official, documented, whispered, denied. And it begins right here in the woods of Camp Navajo. The first reported incident didn't make it into any official report. It was around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night in late October. The air was thin and bitter. Visibility was clear. A pair of junior guards patrolling Sector C near the decommissioned bunker grid noticed something strange. One of the motion detectors had tripped. They moved in quietly, flashlights sweeping across the concrete and sagebrush. At first, nothing. But then, one of them noticed a figure standing just beyond the fence line, tall, unmoving, and blacker than the night around it. It wasn't holding a weapon. It didn't appear to wear any gear. And yet, it stood like it belonged. When the guards called out, it didn't flinch. It didn't run. It simply moved, fluidly, unnaturally, slipping behind the nearest bunker. And by the time they reached that spot, it was gone. No footprints, no heat signature, nothing. Initially, the encounter was brushed off, chalked up to shadows or fatigue. But then, it happened again, and again. Within the span of a few weeks, multiple units began reporting similar sightings, each one eerily identical, a humanoid shape that shouldn't have been there, moving between structures with inhuman smoothness. Always at night, always near restricted bunkers. Security camera footage proved useless. The digital feed glitched or went static during every incident. One tech described the phenomenon as electromagnetic interference localized around the figure. But no one could explain how or why. Soon, some guards refused to patrol alone. A few even requested transfers, citing mental health concerns. But none of that made it into the official logs. Instead, the base issued a quiet protocol change, doubling the patrol units in those sectors, while refusing to acknowledge anything out of the ordinary. Then came the most chilling event. A senior staff sergeant, 6 years stationed, reported seeing the figure inside the fence line. He said it appeared between two igloo bunkers, standing still for nearly 30 seconds. His flashlight didn't reflect off it. His voice recorder didn't capture sound. He drew his sidearm but didn't fire. He described it later in a written statement. It wasn't a man, not even close. It absorbed the light, like a black hole wearing a human shape. That statement was never made public. It was leaked years later through a whistleblower message board. What was seen at Camp Navajo wasn't just a shadow in the dark. It was something that made trained military personnel break protocol. Something that moved like smoke and left no trace. Something that shouldn't have existed, but did. And it wasn't done. As the reports mounted, so did the silence. There were no official press briefings, no declassified investigations, just a pattern of quiet reassignments and frightened whispers. But behind closed doors, the guards began talking, and some of them kept records. In 2011, an anonymous user posted a thread on a now-defunct military forum. The thread was titled simply, "The Thing in the Trees, Camp Navajo, 2002. It was quickly deleted, but not before someone archived it. Here's an excerpt. "We started calling it the Shadow Bastard. No one said it out loud during shift, but everyone knew. It always came between 1:30 and 3 a.m., near bunker row 12. One night I thought I saw it crouched on top of the fence, like it was waiting. It didn't run. It just unfolded and dropped to the ground. Another account came from a soldier stationed at the base from 1999 to 2003. In an interview posted anonymously to a paranormal podcast in 2017, the man, his voice digitally altered, claimed, "You'd feel it first, like your chest would tighten before anything happened. The hair on your arms would stand up, and then you'd hear nothing. No bugs, no wind, just silence. That's when you knew it was nearby. That silence was wrong, like the whole forest was holding its breath." Multiple witnesses described the figure the same way. Tall, humanoid, without facial features. Entirely black, not like clothing, but like absence. One guard, now working in private security, said in a private Reddit AMA, "My partner chased it one night. He thought it was an intruder. He ran full sprint between two igloos, came back white as snow, shaking, said it turned around mid-run and stared at him. No eyes, no mouth, just..." Something he said made him feel wrong in the head. He was gone within a month. Med discharge. A few others described hearing whispers, though never in English. Garbled, guttural phrases that left them with pounding headaches or nosebleeds. One account claimed, "It knew when you were watching." It would stand behind the trees and not move. But the moment you noticed it, it would start moving. Like it wanted you to see it. Like it was playing. Some dismissed these accounts as hallucinations, stress-induced visions from overworked young soldiers. But others, especially those who served more than one winter tour at Camp Navajo, insist these were not isolated dreams. They were patterns, and the descriptions were always consistent. Too consistent. Whatever moved through those woods wasn't just seen, it was felt in the marrow, in the instincts of men trained to face death. And every one of them agrees. It wasn't human. Not even close. By the end of the 2002 winter cycle, Camp Navajo's command staff knew something was wrong. Too many patrol reports were coming in with similar language. Unidentified figure. Unresponsive entity. Electromagnetic interference. And most telling of all, unable to pursue. But there were no alerts issued to state police. No public warnings. Instead, a series of quiet decisions were made behind closed doors. One night, without explanation, civilian contractors were removed from the eastern sectors of the base, specifically near the old weapons bunkers. A temporary internal memo ordered that all patrols be accompanied in pairs, and that reports of visual anomalies be made verbally only, with no paper trail. A few weeks later, the base underwent what appeared to be a communications hardware upgrade. Several security cameras were taken offline, and backup feeds were rerouted. But no official reason was given. An anonymous IT specialist, whose identity was never confirmed, later claimed, "We were told not to recover corrupted footage. They said the data losses were expected." One feed showed a tall figure standing still for 2 full minutes near Bunker 14. The next frame? Static. When I asked why we didn't preserve the tapes, I was told, "That's above your pay grade." Around the same time, a report surfaced in a restricted access military database titled Unidentified Humaniform Presence, NGCAZ, Flagstaff Region. The file, now scrubbed, mentioned a brief internal investigation into an intruder or projection that exhibited non-terrestrial movement and caused psychophysical distress in proximity observers. That language was not standard protocol, and it was the only time non-terrestrial was ever used in an official document tied to Camp Navajo. After this point, the sightings declined, or at least the reports stopped being submitted. Several witnesses were transferred. A few were quietly discharged for mental health instability. One soldier who described seeing the entity twice was admitted to a VA facility in 2004. His case file included a curious note. Subject experiences consistent night terrors centered around a tall humanoid silhouette. Expresses fear of light not penetrating a perceived figure. By 2005, the base was deemed clean. No further incidents on file. But former guards speak differently. Many believe the military didn't resolve the situation. They contained it, fenced it in, shut it up, moved the spotlight elsewhere. No official comment was ever released by the Arizona National Guard. No inquiry by state officials. No mention in public logs. And yet, to this day, reports still surface. Campers in the woods nearby speak of a figure just outside their firelight. Truckers passing the perimeter late at night say they see something at the tree line, watching. No name, no proof, just silence and shadow. When facts disappear into silence, theories take root like weeds. And Camp Navajo? It's become fertile ground for them. Let's start with the simplest explanation. Folklore. The Navajo Nation, whose land borders the region, has long spoken of entities that roam the dark, shadow walkers, cursed humans turned into predatory beings through ritual and taboo. The term skinwalker is known, but rarely spoken aloud by tribal elders. To name it is to invite it. Local legends match elements of what soldiers saw: unnatural silence, shifting forms, a presence that feels wrong. Some speculate the base was constructed on or near a spiritually volatile zone, not just cursed, but disturbed. A place where military activity may have broken ancient boundaries. Others offer a colder theory: cloaking technology. According to a 2009 declassified DARPA brief, experiments in active camouflage and optical distortion fields were being tested as early as 1998. Some whistleblowers allege that Camp Navajo's remote bunkers served as test zones for adaptive suits, ones that could bend light, or worse, scramble perception itself. One former defense analyst, who spoke anonymously to a fringe science podcast, claimed, "It's possible the guards weren't seeing an entity, but experiencing a weaponized hallucination, induced by directed energy or ELF frequencies. If that's true, it worked better than anyone expected." Then there's the psychological warfare theory. Several secretive divisions within U.S. intelligence have explored the use of fear-based stimuli to assess combat readiness and trauma response. Could Camp Navajo have been part of a live trial? Something designed not to harm, but to test how soldiers respond to the unknown. That would explain the silence, the erased footage, the men discharged with hallucinations. Still, many insist it was real. Not a test, not folklore, something else. A less mainstream theory? Dimensional bleed-through. Some researchers believe there are zones on Earth where the barrier between our world and others grows thin, where entities from parallel realities accidentally slip through. A few have linked Camp Navajo to other anomalous hotspots using geomagnetic mapping. The base sits near fault lines and very specific mineral concentrations. What if the entity wasn't hiding from us? What if it was trapped here? Of course, the military denies everything. No entity, no cover-up, no experimentation. And yet, no explanation either. Just blank reports, vanished tapes, and men who still won't talk even decades later. Some truths never surface. Some were buried on purpose. There's no file titled Shadow Entity, no public incident report, no admissions from the Department of Defense. But some entries don't make it into official records. Some stay handwritten, hidden, lost in drawers no one's supposed to open. One such entry surfaced in 2011, a torn page from an unfiled duty log, anonymously mailed to a retired Army psychologist. No return address, no fingerprints. But the signature matched a man discharged from Camp Navajo in 2003. It read, 0217 hours. Returned to Route 9 perimeter. Partner went silent at marker post. Looked up. Figure in trees. No sound, no breath, no reflection. Just black, but not like shadow. It ate the light. I called out. It turned toward me. No face. I couldn't move. Like it reached inside and took something. Partner said nothing afterward. Said he saw nothing. I wish I did too. They never found the author. The log was dismissed as forgery. Case closed, but reports didn't stop. In 2016, a hiker posted on a survivalist forum, claiming he'd camped illegally near the base's edge and was woken at 3 a.m. by a sound like boots dragging across gravel. He looked out of his tent and saw nothing, except one tree swaying against the wind. No birds, no crickets, no explanation. He left before sunrise and never camped again. In 2021, a truck driver passing Route 66 near Bellamont claimed on CB radio to see a tall shape walking between the pines just behind the fence line. The recording exists. He described it in real time. No flashlight, no gear, just a tall thing. Too smooth, like it's not walking, just floating. Then he went silent for 19 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was shaking. I think it saw me. And now, Camp Navajo still stands, still fenced, still active. But parts of it remain unused, unwatched, especially after dark. Soldiers rotate in and out, trained not to ask questions. Locals stay clear of the woods, and beyond the wire in the deep night, something still watches. We don't know what it is. We don't know where it came from. We only know one thing. It was never meant to be seen. And yet, someone always does. This was the last known entry. In the heart of Utah's Uinta Basin lies a property so infamous, it's been called the most haunted land in America. Skinwalker Ranch. For decades, it's been the epicenter of UFO sightings, mutilated cattle, and unexplainable phenomena. But in 2008, something changed. The government pulled back. Private military contractors moved in. Their mission? Classify the unclassifiable. What they found was worse than folklore. Entities in human shape, watching from tree lines. Invisible forces pushing men to the edge of sanity. And a ranch that seemed to respond to fear. The files were sealed, the footage erased. But one source broke the silence. And this is what he saw. In the heart of Utah's Uinta Basin lies a property so infamous, it's been called the most haunted land in America. Skinwalker Ranch. For decades, it's been the epicenter of UFO sightings, mutilated cattle, and unexplainable phenomena. But in 2008, something changed. The government pulled back. Private military contractors moved in. Their mission? Classify the unclassifiable. What they found was worse than folklore. Entities in human shape, watching from tree lines. Invisible forces pushing men to the edge of sanity. And a ranch that seemed to respond to fear. The files were sealed, the footage erased. But one source broke the silence. And this is what he saw. October 14th, 2009. At 0216 hours, the ranch perimeter motion sensors tripped. Zone 3, Eastern Ravine. A location contractors had come to call the Dead Mile, because radios always went silent there. A two-man recon team was dispatched. Call signs Echo 5 and Echo 7. Their report was routine. Wind disturbances, thermal false positives, possibly wildlife. But 3 minutes into the sweep, the body cam feed cut to black. When the footage resumed, briefly, it captured 17 seconds of flickering light. And a figure, tall, emaciated, silhouetted by the infrared. It stood motionless, arms unusually long, head tilted at an unnatural angle. No heat signature, no biometric read. Echo 5 whispered, "There's something wrong with the trees. They're moving, but there's no wind." Then came the scream, a sharp, inhuman screech, cutting through both open mic and encrypted lines. At 0232, the base lost all contact. When reinforcements arrived 11 minutes later, they found Echo 7 unconscious, his suit shredded as if clawed. But no signs of blood. He was airlifted out under psychiatric lock. He never spoke again. Echo 5 was gone. No blood trail, no heat, no drag marks. Only his helmet, half buried in the sand, with the visor scorched from the inside. The investigation began immediately. Radiation levels were elevated in the area, but not from known sources. The scrub cameras caught only glimpses, flashes of movement that vanished before they could be resolved. One analyst noted that multiple frames showed distortions, as if space itself had warped. Even stranger, the recovered footage showed anomalous time codes. 17 seconds of video were stretched across 42 minutes of real time. BAASS filed the report under unidentified dimensional breach. The document was never logged into official systems. Unofficially, the site was quarantined. A metallic barrier was installed, 9 feet high, lined with sensors imported from DARPA's psychic weapon trials. The ravine was renamed by the remaining crew, The Fold. From that night on, no team ever went in alone, and nothing ever came back out. In military contractor logs, witness statements are rare. But after the 2009 incident at The Fold, 3 insiders came forward, anonymously. Their voices were distorted, their names redacted, but their words were chilling. "I was stationed on night watch, October 14th, said one tech operative, codenamed Delta 1. "We heard Echo 5 whisper something about trees breathing. That was the last clear sentence. Then the audio just looped. A gurgling sound, like a broken modem, but wet. And then silence." He paused. "When we recovered the gear, we saw marks on the inside of the helmets, like fingers, but too many, more than 5, curved." Another testimony came from a field psychologist assigned to monitor the remaining team. Echo 7 had no head trauma, no physical injury aside from superficial tearing. But he was vacant. He kept repeating, it wasn't wearing its face right, over and over, like it was a recording, not a memory. The most disturbing account came from a private contractor technician named only as Mira in leaked audio logs. The sensors picked up radio bursts after the team disappeared. We ran them through spectral analysis, thinking it was interference. But it formed a pattern, a structure. When translated from hexadecimal, she takes a breath. It spelled coordinates, ones that led to the basement of the control building, a place we had sealed off since July. We never opened it again. All remaining contractors were required to undergo bi-weekly neurological evaluations. 3 of them developed sleep paralysis. One reported shadow figures standing over him every time he blinked. Two others claimed to hear breathing from inside the walls of their quarters. Lab analysis of the wall material? No abnormalities. One final voice stands out, from an unnamed facility commander. I've served in Iraq, Afghanistan, done recon in zero-light conditions. But Skinwalker Ranch, that place isn't haunted. He pauses. It's aware. By early 2010, 2/3 of the original contractor unit had rotated out, citing psychological instability, time perception disturbances, and electromagnetic interference with implants and pacemakers. Whatever they had encountered, it wasn't just observing. It was interacting. Following the 2009 incident, internal channels at BAASS activated a Category Black lockdown. This protocol, never intended for public knowledge, classified the ravine encounter as a non-terrestrial threat anomaly. Three things happened immediately. First, all sensor footage, biometric data, and communication logs were seized by private aerospace security, believed to be acting under Lockheed Martin's Black Project wing. Second, the eastern quadrant of Skinwalker Ranch was quietly sealed off, its boundaries redrawn on satellite maps to appear as unused government test range. Third, all surviving personnel signed revised NDAs. The penalties for breach? Federal prison and immediate forfeiture of all government clearances. One internal memo, leaked in 2018 by a whistleblower known only as K-, detailed an urgent request from Department of Energy observers. The memo read, "Phenomena observed on site suggest transdimensional instability with possible entropic bleed. Recommend immediate EM field containment or total desertion of the fold area." No containment was ever built. Instead, the entire region was shut down in early 2010 under the guise of budget termination. A final report, marked Level 5 confidential, described anomalous sentience localized within a 30-meter radius of the ravine. It noted, apparent intelligent response to observation attempts. Entity displays anticipation, appears capable of mimicking electromagnetic signals, voices, and tactile presence. In short, it watched them watching it. Publicly, no mention of this exists. No headlines, no official deaths. And the incident? Buried beneath redacted pages, non-disclosure clauses, and the plausible deniability of privatized military contracts. When asked in a 2013 interview whether the U.S. government still maintains an interest in Skinwalker Ranch, a former Pentagon insider smiled. Then he said, "We don't study that place anymore. We wait. When the military retreats, when scientists go silent, the vacuum fills with questions and theories. At Skinwalker Ranch, especially after the 2009 contractor incident, speculation runs wild. But not all theories are born from fantasy. Some come from classified science. Theory 1. Dimensional rift. The most grounded theory among insiders suggests that the fold, that twisted stretch of ravine, is more than just cursed land. It's a tearing point, a spatial rift between dimensions. Leaked physics memos from the BAASS archives reference locally reversible time anomalies and temporal dislocation fields. One paper even references a term used by DARPA in the 1990s, phase-stable nonlinear realities. In plain language, time doesn't work there the same way it does here. Theory 2. Mimetic sentience. Several encounters involved voices, signals, and even appearances of lost personnel. Some now believe the entity within the fold isn't just a creature. It's an intelligence, not alien, not spiritual, but something that learns by imitation. It mimics speech, appearance, even emotion. using it as a lure, like a predator, wearing your friend's face. Theory 3. Government experimental zone. A darker possibility. The entire event was orchestrated. An experiment in consciousness manipulation. Declassified CIA projects like MKUltra proved one thing. The government has tested perception-altering tech before. What if the fold is not a tear, but a mirror? A place designed to bend reality and study the reaction of trained operatives under unknown stressors. Some say the gear malfunctions, the hallucinations, the unexplainable wounds could all be intentional artifacts. One former DIA analyst stated anonymously, "Skinwalker Ranch was never just about aliens or wolves. It's about what the human mind does when the rules of physics stop working." Theory 4. The Skinwalker legend. And then, there's the Old Blood. The Ute tribe, whose land borders the ranch, spoke of shadow creatures, skinwalkers, that roam cursed territory. Not spirits, not demons, but shapeshifters, tricksters of the highest order. According to the oral traditions, skinwalkers live in the space between worlds. They come not to haunt, but to test. And when you see one, you were meant to. On February 14th, 2010, the final private security contractor stationed near the fold submitted a brief internal log before radio silence. Lights in the southeast ravine again. No EM signature. No known flight paths. Something is mimicking the wind. Recommend perimeter be redrawn again. I don't think we're alone. Logging off, we'll check in before dawn. That check-in never came. His name has never been released. The file is now sealed under duty contractor privacy protection. Since then, Skinwalker Ranch has shifted hands, rebranded, fenced, surveilled. But the land remembers. Recent visitors, YouTubers, journalists, amateur scientists report GPS blackouts, sudden illness, and auditory hallucinations in the same southeastern ravine. In 2021, a leaked satellite photo briefly made its rounds on encrypted forums. It appeared to show a perfect circular depression in the earth, exactly 30 meters across, burned into the soil. The thread disappeared within hours. User accounts were deactivated. The image, scrubbed, and still. The question remains, what did those contractors see? Why has every effort to study it ended in silence or sickness? And what is it about this place that watches you back? This was the last known entry from the Fort Polk files. Entity no longer responds to passive observation. Initiated active evasion. Recommend zero further engagement. The ravine is awake. So if you ever find yourself in the Utah desert, and the air suddenly feels wrong, and your GPS spins, and your radio starts whispering in your own voice, turn around, don't answer, and above all, don't follow the lights. Tikrit, Iraq, 2003. A Special Forces unit is deployed deep in enemy territory. No contact for 6 hours. Last known location? A collapsed stone cave tucked into the hills northeast of Saddam Hussein's hometown. The final radio transmission? A whisper. We're not alone down here. What followed was buried in after-action reports and sanitized for Pentagon briefings. But some of the soldiers who made it out, barely, spoke of shadows that moved against the light, of voices that didn't echo, and of something ancient waiting in the dark. This is not a story of insurgents. It's not about politics or tactics or war. It's about what soldiers found beneath the sand and what followed them back out. This is the Iraq Jinn Cave Encounter, Spring 2003. Tikrit, Iraq, the birthplace of Saddam Hussein and the heart of Sunni resistance during the early stages of the US invasion. The heat is suffocating. The sand gets into everything, Boots, guns, lungs, and the city is crawling with suspicion, not just from insurgents, but from something older. American troops from the 3rd Infantry Division were stationed on the outskirts of Tikrit, tasked with rooting out hidden caches of weapons and tracking down regime loyalists. It was dirty work, dangerous, and often led them deep into places not marked on any satellite image. One such place was a stretch of low, rocky hills northeast of the city, where a routine patrol uncovered something strange. A cave, unlisted, unmapped, and unlike anything locals had mentioned, it wasn't natural. The opening was cut with geometric precision, too angular, too perfect to be formed by erosion. The air pouring from it was icy, even in 100-degree heat. When locals were questioned, the reaction was always the same. Tight lips, crossed fingers. Some whispered a single word, Ifrit. Others refused to even look toward the hills. An old shepherd finally told an interpreter what the others wouldn't. It's not a cave, it's a trap. It eats men. It's where the jinn were buried after they tried to burn the sky. American command brushed it off. Orders came down fast. Explore, clear, report. A 6-man recon team was sent in. They carried infrared gear, radio uplinks, and standard-issue M4s. What they found inside would never make it into any official war record. But their body cams did capture something. Just enough to raise eyebrows at CENTCOM. Before those files vanished, the team entered the cave shortly after 1600 hours. Each man equipped with night vision, body cams, and a standard field radio. There was no natural light past the first 30 feet. Beyond that, just darkness and dust that didn't settle. The passage narrowed, then widened into a chamber. Walls were marked with deep, spiraling carvings, some crude, some geometric, etched into blackened stone. One soldier, Private Mendez, noted the temperature drop. He tapped his thermometer. 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Like walking into a freezer, his voice recorded. But drier, wrong. They advanced deeper. That's when the gear started acting up. Static on the comms, night vision flickering. Infrared failed altogether. Too much interference. Then came the noise. Not a growl, not a voice, a breath. Low, guttural, like it came from behind the walls. Corporal Davis spun around, weapon raised. No target. Another team member, Sergeant Coulter, spoke directly into his mic. We're hearing voices. Female, not Iraqi, singing. At the 20-minute mark, their body cams captured movement. Black silhouettes that slithered between the light beams, never quite visible, never quite there. The team's lead, Lieutenant Harrow, ordered extraction. Too late. Private Mendez began convulsing, screaming, not in pain, but in laughter, uncontrollable, terrifying. They're in my blood. They're behind my eyes. They carried him out. He kept laughing until he passed out. And when he woke, he wouldn't speak English anymore. Only an old dialect of Mesopotamian Akkadian, according to linguists who reviewed later. The rest of the team returned to base, shaken, incoherent, some with bleeding ears despite no loud detonations. None of their video files made it past the debrief. All footage reportedly transferred to a black disk courier flight under direct CIA oversight. But one unofficial clip made it out. A 3-second shot, flickering lights in the cave's depth, and a pair of eyes, not human, watching through the dark. Eyes that blinked sideways. In the weeks that followed, 3 of the 6 soldiers were medically discharged. Official reason, acute stress response. Unofficially, they were deemed unstable. Private Mendez, the one who spoke in ancient tongues, was transferred to Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. He reportedly became severely sleep-deprived. When sedated, he whispered cryptic phrases like, "Eyes in the stone, fire beneath the skin. It still sees me." Medical staff noted signs of psychological distress. One report mentioned he caused superficial injuries to his hands during an apparent episode. Sergeant Coulter gave a single statement before withdrawing completely. "We weren't supposed to be there. That place was buried for a reason. You can't kill what's not alive." He was later diagnosed with dissociative symptoms, despite no prior record of mental health issues. Lieutenant Harrow, the team lead, refused all interviews, but an anonymous nurse who treated him during his evaluation later described, "He doesn't blink, just stares. Keeps sketching that spiral symbol over and over. Says the cave knew his name." Military command locked down the incident. Internal documents, later leaked on encrypted forums, revealed the team's weapons were never discharged. Yet every rifle returned with warped barrels, as if exposed to extreme pressure. An anomaly inside a cold stone cave. Base personnel, curious after the recovery op, attempted to revisit the cave days later. It was gone. The entrance collapsed or sealed. Seismic data captured a short but powerful vibration at the exact location, just hours after the team's exit. Some called it a localized quake, others a pulse. Local Iraqis weren't surprised. An interpreter named Hakim, stationed nearby, told a journalist in 2006, "You Americans always think monsters come with teeth. Ours come with silence. The government's stance? No credible threat, equipment malfunction, stress-induced hallucinations." But those 6 men knew the truth. And for the 3 who left with their minds intact, they've never set foot underground again. Within 48 hours of the team's extraction, Camp Iron Horse, the forward base near Tikrit, was visited by a non-military team. Men in unmarked uniforms. No ranks, no insignias. They moved fast, seized all body cam footage, radios, thermal gear, even the soldiers' uniforms. A full blackout. No logs, no transfers, no debriefs filed through normal channels. It wasn't CENTCOM, it wasn't CIA. One source from within the intelligence community would only call them Black Watch. That's not a formal group, officially, but it's whispered among contractors and DIA operatives, used when events don't fit any known protocol. The surviving soldiers were each separated, flown to different facilities, and interrogated under sedation. Lieutenant Harrow, gone. Discharged under a rarely used clause. Psychological incompatibility with battlefield conditions. A quiet career suicide. But the ripple spread wider than that one team. A SIGINT technician stationed at a nearby intel outpost claims a satellite uplink anomaly occurred during the cave incident. For 11 minutes, uplink data from Tikrit was overwritten, not jammed, not corrupted. Overwritten with pure black signal. Zeros. Deliberate obfuscation. They'd only seen that once before. In Kosovo, during a 1999 mission involving strange radar echoes inside a burned-out Orthodox monastery. The Department of Defense officially classified the Tikrit cave operation as routine recon interruption. No mention of altered consciousness. No mention of possible entity contact. But one whistleblower, a civilian contractor with SOCOM clearance, leaked a heavily redacted memo in 2014. Subject Alpha 03 exposed to non-physical aggression. Subjects Beta through Foxtrot displayed acute memetic contamination. Recommend containment protocols. Class 5 memetic contamination. That's not battlefield language. That's esoteric warfare terminology, the kind usually reserved for encounters that can't be explained with bullets and blueprints. And so the incident faded, or more accurately, was buried, not with denial, but with silence. A silence so perfect, it left no trace. Except for those few who still wake in the dark, hearing echoes from a cave that, officially, never existed. So, what happened in the cave near Tikrit? Let's explore the theories. Some are grounded, some are buried in whispers. Theory 1. Psychological breakdown. The most common explanation, by military and skeptics alike, is simple. Stress-induced psychosis. War zones twist the mind. Isolation, darkness, adrenaline. It's a perfect recipe for hallucination. Could 6 soldiers, hardened, trained, have collectively broken down? It's rare, but not impossible. Group psychosis has been documented, especially in enclosed spaces with low oxygen and heightened stress. But then, how do we explain the warped gun barrels, the blacked-out satellite data, the missing footage? Too many loose ends for a clean psychological bow. Theory 2. Classified weapons test. Some believe the soldiers stumbled into a clandestine experiment. Something ancient unearthed and weaponized. An acoustic frequency, a microwave projector, or a mimetic weapon. Mimetic warfare is real. Strategies that use symbols, words, even geometry to induce mental collapse. Could that spiral symbol have been part of a payload? If so, who was testing it? And why inside a buried cave? A tech beyond what we know? Or older than anything we've built? Theory 3. Jinn contact. This is where folklore and fact blur. Iraq has thousands of years of oral history, stories of jinn hiding in caves, deserts, and ruins. Not demons, not ghosts. Entities of smoke and thought, born of fire. The Quran describes them as living beings, parallel to humans, invisible, capable of interaction, sometimes violent. Local tribal elders warned U.S. forces early in the war. Do not enter the red caves, the old ones sleep there. This cave near Tikrit matched those coordinates. The soldiers didn't believe until they saw. Their minds changed, their weapons altered, their silence paid for. This theory explains the symbols, the mutterings, the hallucinations. But it raises one terrifying implication. They weren't hallucinating. They were warned. Some call it myth, others call it mice identification. But whatever stood in that cave, it left its mark. And it's still there. Waiting. There's no official record of what happened inside that cave near Tikrit. No names in public archives, no commendations, no casualties, only silence. And in that silence, we found one thing. A forgotten entry, half redacted, from an operations log tied to the 101st Airborne. Just one line. Subject 0 ceased vocal response at 0337 hours. Body intact. Mind unresponsive. Immediate evac ordered. Environmental threat remains non-kinetic. We are not alone. That line, that single sentence, is the only surviving trace of the event. No names, no coordinates, no follow-up, just, we are not alone. Today, the cave's location remains off-limits, officially sealed under a cultural preservation order by local Iraqi forces, an agreement the U.S. reportedly requested. Satellite imagery shows a small plateau, barren, undisturbed. But if you zoom in close enough, you'll notice something strange. In every photo, taken years apart, there's always a shadow at the entrance. Unchanging, motionless, waiting. And the men who made it out? Most won't talk. Some disappeared. One was found dead in Colorado in 2013. No signs of trauma. Just gone. His final journal entry. It followed me home, not in body, in thought. When I sleep, I go back to the cave. Narrator, closing, foreboding. In war, there are enemies you see, and those you don't. Not insurgents, not politics, but shadows. And sometimes, those shadows stare back. This was the Iraq Jinn Cave encounter. Another file from the edge of reason. Another last known entry. It wasn't the Viet Cong they feared most in the jungle. It was what watched them from the trees. Hair-covered, silent as shadow, with red eyes that glowed at night. Decades later, veterans still won't camp near tree lines. Not after what they saw in the highlands of Vietnam. The year is 1967. The jungles of Vietnam stretch endlessly, dense, humid, and pulsing with the weight of unseen eyes. U.S. forces, embedded deep in the central highlands near the Laotian border, navigate thick canopies and hostile terrain. Every branch crack, every leaf stir could mean ambush. But not all dangers wore uniforms. The region around Dong Nai, Kon Tum, and the Annamite Mountains became known for something far stranger than guerrilla warfare. American patrol units began to whisper about others in the jungle, beings not of the enemy ranks, nor known to science. Official maps marked the area as part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail network. Unofficially, soldiers began calling it Rock Ape Territory. At first, the stories were dismissed as war stress, hallucinations, or nighttime nerves. But the consistency across units, over years, couldn't be ignored. They spoke of bipedal, ape-like creatures, standing 4 to 5 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown hair. Eyes that reflected a deep amber when caught in flashlight beams. And most disturbingly, an intelligence behind the gaze. These weren't chimps or orangutans. They were something else. Jungle silence could be suffocating. But what unnerved men the most was when it went completely quiet. No birds, no frogs. Only the sound of breathing that wasn't their own. The first official mention came in a 1966 after-action report from the 101st Airborne Division. A reconnaissance patrol had been conducting a night perimeter watch near the A Shao Valley when they heard low guttural grunts coming from the tree line. Thinking it was Viet Cong signaling in the dark, the team radioed for backup. But what emerged wasn't human. Through the night vision scope, Sergeant Harold Mance described seeing 3 figures, short, thick-bodied, moving upright. One picked up a fallen branch the size of a rifle and hurled it with unnatural strength toward their position. When flares were launched, the creatures vanished into the foliage with astonishing speed. Over the next few months, similar encounters were reported by different units. 7th Marines near Quang Tri encountered rock-throwing figures during night patrols. 173rd Airborne Brigade reportedly fired into the jungle after a soldier was struck by a rock to the helmet. One radio log, later leaked, included this chilling phrase: "Contact, not enemy. Smaller, covered in fur. No casualties, but entire squad refuses to re-enter area." In 1968, a platoon stationed near Firebase Ripcord experienced what would become the most infamous encounter. At dusk, while cleaning weapons, the men reported unearthly screeches echoing from a nearby hill. They formed a defensive line. Then, in eerie silence, the first rock flew. It was followed by a volley, stones the size of softballs, crashing through branches and landing with shocking accuracy. Night fell, and the assault stopped. But not the fear. Multiple soldiers claimed they saw glowing eyes watching them from the treetops. One man, Specialist Torres, was found the next morning curled into a fetal position, mumbling in Spanish about the forest people. He was evacuated for psychiatric evaluation. He never returned to active duty. Despite the absence of confirmed kills or wounds, the psychological impact of these encounters was severe. In some cases, entire units refused to patrol certain areas again. The creatures, if they were creatures at all, seemed to understand terrain, timing, and intimidation. Officially, there are no confirmed records of any non-human encounters during the Vietnam War. Unofficially, the stories never stopped. Staff Sergeant Mitchell Hayes, 3rd Recon Battalion, 1969. They weren't monkeys. I've seen monkeys in Nam. These were something else. Their eyes, they didn't just look at you, they watched you. Hayes described a nighttime operation near the Cambodian border where his team was shadowed for 3 days. He recounted hearing snapping twigs, but not in a panic, as if they were being observed. Then came the rocks, always thrown from just out of sight. Never random, always toward their food packs or radio. They were testing us, he said in a 1982 interview. Like wolves watching from the dark, but smarter. Private Allen, Mick Roberts, 25th Infantry, 1970. Roberts recounted seeing what he first thought was a wounded soldier crouched by a fallen tree. As he approached, the figure stood upright and emitted a deep, rhythmic chest thump. It looked like a man and an ape mixed, but its arms were too long. It wasn't scared of us. He froze. So did the creature. Then, in a blur, it disappeared into the foliage. Marine Captain Thomas Zeller, retired. In a classified letter later leaked in the late 90s, Zeller wrote, "We dismissed too many of these events. At the time, the priority was to win a war, not chase jungle myths. But I've had too many reports from too many good men. Whatever was out there wasn't the enemy we were trained for." Some accounts came years later, when the veterans were home, away from command silencing or fear of ridicule. In one rare recorded interview in 1994, an anonymous Army scout admitted, "I saw one up close. Broad chest, human-like face. It opened its mouth and hissed like a threat. I emptied half a clip into the trees. Didn't hit a damn thing. But I never went back to that hill." Many dismissed these testimonies as stress-induced hallucinations or sleep deprivation. But these weren't green recruits. These were hardened men, battle-tested, and terrified of something that didn't carry a rifle. Despite growing rumors among ground units, official military channels remained silent. No memos, no advisories, nothing beyond the expected orders to maintain discipline and stay focused on the mission. But behind the silence, something stirred. Unofficial investigations. In 1971, a series of internal communications between field commanders in the I Corps were reportedly intercepted by a civilian contractor. Declassified decades later through a FOIA request, one message simply read, "Advise units not to engage with nocturnal non-combat entities. Maintain distance. Do not pursue. Report activity to base command." No names. No signatures. Just a set of instructions that quietly acknowledged what many were already whispering. The rock apes were real, and they were being monitored. Biological anomalies. A rumored joint study between U.S. forces and ARVN intelligence reportedly involved the recovery of blood samples from a wounded creature. According to a leaked 1973 journal entry from a medic, blood thicker than human. Hemoglobin structure resembled primate, but with anomalies we couldn't classify. The sample disappeared from records shortly after. The medic? Discharged. No further documentation available. Psych ops or something else? Some have speculated that the sightings were part of a psychological warfare operation designed to intimidate or test hallucinogens on soldiers in the field. But veterans who were there insist, you don't hallucinate the same thing across divisions, in different provinces, across multiple years. Post-war reports silenced. In 1976, a memo from the Department of the Army addressed to the Veterans Administration contained this redacted passage. Due to persistent folklore regarding non-human aggressors in theater, it is recommended that medical interviewers apply discretion when engaging PTSD patients reporting anthropoid threats. In other words, don't encourage the story. Don't validate it. Don't document it. Even so, some brave veterans continue to speak at reunions, in independent interviews, and eventually, online. By the early 2000s, whispers of a Vietnam Bigfoot or Rock Ape War files began to circulate in fringe forums, UFO archives, and cryptid databases. But one thing was always clear. The US government wasn't interested in acknowledging what its soldiers saw. The Vietnam War birthed countless stories, but few have defied classification like the rock apes. What were they? Where did they come from? And why, amidst so much death and chaos, were they so fiercely guarded in silence? Here are the leading theories, each more unsettling than the last. Theory 1. Unknown primate species. Some biologists suggest that rock apes were undocumented primates, native to Southeast Asia, possibly related to the Gigantopithecus, a massive prehistoric ape believed to have gone extinct 300,000 years ago. Could a surviving offshoot have adapted to the Vietnamese highlands? Several soldiers reported creatures between 5 and 6 feet tall, walking bipedally, hurling stones with coordinated aggression. That's not guerrilla behavior, that's tactical behavior. And in some encounters, witnesses claimed the creatures had human-like eyes, betraying intelligence, not instinct. Still, skeptics argue, if such a species existed, where are the bodies? The fossils? But in the dense, uncharted jungles of Vietnam, things disappear. Theory 2. Combat stress hallucinations. Military psychologists floated this explanation post-war. Under extreme stress, sleep deprivation, and prolonged exposure to enemy territory, soldiers may have shared hallucinations, fed by group hysteria and the primal fear of being hunted. But the consistency of reports across units, years, and regions challenges this. Can hundreds of soldiers, from different backgrounds, invent the same beast, with the same behaviors, in locations separated by hundreds of miles? One former Green Beret answered bluntly, "We hallucinated plenty out there, but not together, and not with the same damn thing chasing us through the trees." Theory 3. Government experimentation. This theory delves darker. Some claim the rock apes were bioengineered assets, part of black-budget DARPA programs involving primate intelligence enhancement and jungle combat testing. Sound far-fetched? In 1969, a Vietnamese newspaper article surfaced briefly, translated and shared among war correspondents. It spoke of white-skinned jungle demons emerging from U.S. camps at night, leaving bloody livestock and torn trees in their wake. Was it local myth? Propaganda? Or was the U.S. military testing something it couldn't control? One theory links this to Project MKOFTEN, a real CIA initiative involving chemical manipulation and behavioral testing, including on animals. No direct proof connects the rock apes to MKOFTEN, but in the world of covert warfare, absence of evidence is standard protocol. Theory 4. The supernatural. Some Vietnamese tribes believe the forest was alive, protected by spirits or guardians. They told stories of Nguoi Rung, the jungle people, not beasts, but sentient entities, tied to the land, appearing when the forest was disrespected or invaded. Could the rock apes be guardians, awakened by war? American soldiers scoffed at these tales, until they saw eyes glowing in the tree line and heard language like howls echoing through the valley. Despite decades of silence, whispers persist, and for every theory, a new question emerges. After the war, official records made no mention of the rock apes. Combat logs were scrubbed. Witness reports never made it past the first layer of command. And those who spoke out? Silenced by ridicule or by classified orders. A few veterans tried, submitting unofficial memoirs, writing into late-night AM radio shows, posting anonymously on early internet forums in the late 90s. Most were ignored. Some were deleted. And one, known only by his call sign, Grunt Echo 7, vanished days after uploading a series of digitized war reels that included an unidentifiable creature standing upright in a jungle clearing. The footage? Gone. Re-uploads, scrubbed. Account? Dead link. But in 2005, during a joint US-Vietnamese biodiversity expedition, a field team stationed in Thanh Nguyen recorded unexplained bipedal movement on infrared cameras. Loud wood knocks were also captured in audio files, later dismissed as environmental anomalies. Still, the lead zoologist privately noted in his log, "It felt like we were being observed. Constantly. But not by locals, and not by animals I know." In recent years, drone surveillance over parts of central Vietnam revealed strange track patterns in otherwise untouched forest floors. Twisted trees, stone piles stacked in deliberate formations. No confirmed species responsible, no explanation given. And when satellite thermal scans picked up a series of heat blooms moving bipedally at night across Da Krong Nature Reserve, well, the files were quickly classified. The war may be over, but something stayed behind. They don't howl anymore. They watch, and they wait. The last known entry on the rock apes of Vietnam? A 2019 blog post by an American expat living near the old fire bases. He claimed his dog vanished after barking violently into the tree line. That night, he heard stones hitting his tin roof, followed by two low, guttural grunts outside his window. He posted one sentence before going silent online. "I think the war left a scar in this jungle, and it's still bleeding. Some mysteries fade with time. This one? It breathes in the trees." This was last known entry. July 2008. A U.S. Army night patrol at Fort Bliss, Texas, responds to a routine breach alarm near an abandoned munitions depot. When they arrive, the motion sensors are shredded. The sand is torn. The tracks? Bipedal, heavy and clawed. They radio for backup. But only one word comes back through the static. It's watching. The men would never speak of what they saw beyond that fence line. Some say it was a feral animal. Others, something far worse. A forgotten experiment, a relic, or a predator that never belonged in our world at all. This is the Fort Bliss werewolf file. In the flat, sun-scorched sprawl of western Texas, near the border of Mexico, lies Fort Bliss, one of the largest U.S. Army installations in the country. A place built for warfighting readiness, for tank drills and missile tests, not for folklore. But something stirred here in the mid-2000s. At first, it was whispered in the barracks. Late-night patrols reporting movement in the brush, too fast to be human, too large to be a coyote. Then came the missing livestock, security camera malfunctions, and the sounds. Bone-deep howls echoing through the Oregon mountains, where no wolves had roamed in decades. Officially, it was written off. Unofficially, A half-dozen soldiers across different units reported seeing the same thing. A creature, upright, massive, eyes that glowed amber, fur matted with what looked like blood and sand. Some called it a skinwalker. Others, less generous with words, simply called it the thing that watches from the ridge. What follows is not legend. These are transcribed military incident reports, leaked memos, and whistleblower accounts from soldiers who were there. Some wish they hadn't survived it. Others haven't spoken since. It began just after 200 hours on March 19, 2006, along Delta Range, the northernmost live fire zone at Fort Bliss. A two-man guard unit, Specialist James Holbrook and Private Eli Mercer, were stationed near the radar perimeter relay. At 0213, Holbrook radioed in. Base command, we've got unidentified movement at Sector 4. Humanoid, but pacing. Too fast. No heat sig. Command responded with standard protocol. Do not engage. Maintain observation. Backup en route. But Holbrook broke protocol. According to Mercer's later debrief, the figure wasn't just moving, it was circling them, watching. Then came the scream. Not human, not animal. Like a growl choked through vocal cords not meant to speak. At 0217, the relay's cameras went dark, fried, static. Mercer claimed the generator lights blinked twice, then went black. Night vision picked up a silhouette. 7 feet tall, thick mane, bent limbs, long claws. It rushed their post. Holbrook discharged his sidearm, 3 rounds. Mercer said, it didn't drop. It didn't even flinch. By the time reinforcements arrived at 0222, the scene was chaos. Blood, deep gashes in the steel siding. Holbrook, unconscious, dragged 15 feet from the post. His vest shredded like paper. No sign of the creature. K9 units brought in to track it refused to move past the perimeter. One handler reported the dogs whining, tails tucked, refusing command. The official report listed the event as a training mishap with wildlife interference. But the testimonies tell a different story. Private Eli Mercer, visibly shaken during his debrief, repeatedly used one phrase. It wasn't a man. Mercer described a creature on 2 legs, covered in thick, matted hair. Its eyes, he said, were reflective, like a wolf's in headlights, but wrong, too intelligent. In his own words, it moved like it knew us, like it waited. It studied Holbrook, then charged. We were bait. Sergeant Tanya Velasquez, part of the QRF, Quick Reaction Force, arrived minutes later. She stated, the perimeter sensor didn't trip like it should have. Something crossed without triggering the alarm. Specialist Donovan Reyes, assigned to the retrieval unit, noted, there were claw marks halfway up the comms pole. That's 10 feet up. No bear climbs like that. He also reported a scent, iron, rot, and wet fur, lingering for hours. A base nurse, whose name remains redacted, treated Holbrook in medical isolation. She confided to an off-the-record source. He kept whispering, it wore a face, but it wasn't human. It was a mask. Holbrook was later transferred to Brooke Army Medical Center under mental evaluation. No further statements. He was discharged 6 months later, citing severe psychological trauma induced by high-stress combat simulation. What followed the incident wasn't an inquiry. It was a cleanup. The military police were first on scene. No photographs, no written witness statements. Within hours, CID, the Army's Criminal Investigation Division, took over. According to an anonymous junior officer, a civilian team arrived at Fort Bliss less than 24 hours later. They wore no insignia, drove in unmarked SUVs, and took the surveillance tapes, sensor logs, and Holbrook's gear. When asked who authorized the handover, no one answered. The perimeter where the attack happened was closed off under a training zone quarantine. The trees with the claw marks, cut down and removed. Blood samples were collected from the dirt, but they never appeared in lab records. A base-wide briefing was held 3 days later. Soldiers were told, this was a test of base emergency readiness. Any discussion of unusual activity may result in disciplinary action. Holbrook's name was scrubbed from the QRF roster. A maintenance worker claimed his clearance was revoked after he asked about the burned-out thermal camera on that same comms pole. Most disturbing, someone quietly issued non-disclosure agreements to those present. Several soldiers transferred out within the month. And Fort Bliss went back to business as usual. No official incident, no press coverage, just an erased night under Texas moonlight. With the official record wiped clean, speculation became the only currency. And theories? They spread like wildfire through Fort Bliss and beyond. Theory 1. A rogue, classified military experiment. Some believe the creature was engineered, the result of biological warfare research conducted off books. A black project gone wrong. Witnesses claimed the entity moved like it was trained. Calculated, observant, efficient, not wild, not random. Deliberate. Theory 2. A skinwalker. The name surfaced repeatedly, whispered by Navajo soldiers stationed on base. In their tradition, a skinwalker is a shapeshifter, a cursed entity. And the land beneath Fort Bliss, once part of disputed tribal territory. Locals around El Paso have long told stories of strange howls in the Franklin Mountains, of shadowy figures that vanish when headlights hit them. Theory 3. Something older. The idea that this wasn't military, or even cryptid, but ancient. Something that had been here long before the base. A guardian disturbed by noise, light, and human intrusion. Some soldiers claimed Holbrook's final radio transmission, never released, contained the phrase, "It came out of the ground." Whatever it was, one truth remains. It wasn't supposed to be seen. And those who did see it either left or stayed silent. Years have passed since the night of the Fort Bliss encounter. The official records remain scrubbed, a digital vacuum where reports should be. No incident logs, no audio recordings, no mention of Specialist Holbrook, not even a death certificate. Whispers persist in the barracks, told in hushed tones by soldiers who know better than to speak too loudly. One recurring story? A lone figure sometimes seen walking along the fence near the old ammunition depot. Tall, limping slightly, its shape wrong in the dark. A few guards claimed their floodlights would cut out, only for the thing to be closer when they flickered back on. Most say it's just legend, base myth. But others? They believe the Fort Bliss creature never left, that it's watching, waiting, and that whatever it is, it wasn't finished that night in 2008. The last known entry in the base's now lost security log? A line of garbled code. No timestamp? Just one phrase buried deep in the metadata. 2002, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. A U.S. Special Forces unit goes dark while clearing a cave system outside a remote village. Hours later, another team is sent in. What they find isn't enemy combatants. It's blood, scorched stone, and something impossible. Over 12 feet tall, eyes like molten fire. A beast the locals won't name aloud. But call only one thing: the giant. This is the mission that was never supposed to be recorded. And what follows was buried deeper than any cave. The year was 2002. Operation Enduring Freedom was in full swing. U.S. forces had moved deep into Afghanistan's southern provinces, Kandahar among them, a region steeped in ancient history and older fears. This was no ordinary battlefield. Kandahar was mountainous, harsh, barren by day, freezing by night. Locals rarely ventured beyond their villages after sundown. When asked why, they'd mutter things like Jinn Ha or Shaitan in the cliffs. Spirits, demons, old things best left unnamed. To American ears, it sounded like folklore. But to those stationed there, Green Berets, Delta operators, night recon units, the terrain carried a silence that never felt empty. It pressed against the skin. It watched. In late March, a special forces team designated as Alpha Unit was dispatched to investigate a series of disappearances. Civilians first, then a patrol. Intel had pointed to a suspected cave network in the Tora Bora foothills, far from any established stronghold. No Taliban presence, no movement, just people vanishing. Their mission was a daylight sweep, standard recon, search the cave system, report findings. Radio contact was expected within 90 minutes. But after the first transmission, entering cave mouth, moving in, there was only static. And then, silence. 2 hours passed. No contact. An emergency QRF, Quick Reaction Force, was scrambled. A second Special Forces unit was flown in from a nearby forward operating base. Their orders: locate Alpha Unit, assess the situation, extract if necessary. The team landed by helo in the late afternoon, dust kicking up around the steep incline where Alpha's last coordinates had pinged. There was no sign of a struggle, no tracks, no blood, just silence, and the cave yawning wide into the rock like a wound. They moved in, tack lights on, NVG ready. 20 meters in, they began noticing strange gouges along the stone walls. Not made by tools, claw marks, deep, wide, and too high up to be from any human. About 50 meters in, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. That's when they saw it. A shape, massive, red-haired, crouched over something. A body. It stood, 8 to 12 feet tall, muscular, barefoot, matted hair from head to ankle, sunken eyes that caught the beam of a flashlight and didn't flinch. 2 teeth protruded like tusks, and in its hands, what remained of a soldier's uniform. It roared and lunged. 2 men were knocked flat instantly. 1 never moved again. The rest opened fire. M4s, sidearms, even a grenade. The chamber filled with thunder. When the smoke cleared, the thing was down. Dead, hard to say. But it bled, thick, dark, reeking of iron and rot. They wrapped it in netting, radioed for extraction. A CH-47 was flown in at nightfall. The body was airlifted to Bagram, then, allegedly, to a black site in Germany. That's where the official story ends. Or at least, where it's supposed to. Officially, the Pentagon has no comment. But the men who were there, those who spoke out before disappearing from public life, tell a very different story. One of the surviving QRF members, a former staff sergeant named Dan Whitcomb, gave a single off-record interview in 2007. His words, captured on a shaky camcorder in a motel room outside Fort Bragg: "That wasn't a man. That wasn't Taliban. We lit it up with everything short of a javelin, and it still kept coming for a few seconds. I saw its eyes, man. Like it didn't just see me, it knew me." He claimed the creature was nearly impossible to move, estimated at over 1,100 pounds. Even the Chinook strained under the weight. Another alleged whistleblower, calling himself Michael B., posted on a now-defunct military forum in 2012. 2 weeks after the op, CID came around. Told us the official line was, "We engaged insurgents in a cave. and collateral damage included structural collapse. My buddy who fired the grenade? Discharged for mental instability 3 months later. Several members of the QRF team were reportedly reassigned. Others vanished from military records entirely. Even stranger, Whitcomb mentioned a recurring symbol, a spiral carved into the cave wall. Some kind of ancient glyph, he claimed. No one could explain it, but it left a mark on them, literally. He lifted his sleeve to reveal a scar, not from the attack, but from something else. A burn in the same spiral shape that appeared the day after. He wasn't alone. 3 other men in the unit, according to his claims, bore the same mark. None could explain it. None could sleep without nightmares. After the operation, military brass went into lockdown mode. All files were classified, marked top secret, eyes only. The base was placed under a gag order. Personnel warned against discussing the incident. An internal investigation was launched. Officially, the report claimed the team had engaged hostile forces in a cave system, with no survivors on the enemy side. But no weapons or bodies matching the description of the creature ever surfaced. Whistleblowers say the investigation was a whitewash, designed to erase any trace of what really happened. CID officers reportedly confiscated personal devices, deleted recordings, and issued stern threats to silence anyone who questioned the official narrative. The soldiers who survived faced mysterious medical discharges and psychological evaluations. The scarred spiral symbol, rumored to be connected to unknown supernatural forces, was dismissed as combat stress manifestation. Local Afghan villagers remained tight-lipped, but some quietly referred to the mountain as cursed. Several years later, the cave entrance collapsed, sealing the secrets within. Meanwhile, journalists who tried to dig deeper were stonewalled or lost in bureaucratic red tape. This has only fueled speculation that the military is hiding something far darker than mere insurgents. The Giant of Kandahar has become a legend whispered among special forces and conspiracy circles alike. Some believe the creature was a genetic experiment, part of a secret bioweapons program gone rogue. Others suggest it was an ancient guardian spirit, awakened to protect sacred ground from intrusion. Folklore from the region speaks of shaitan, demonic entities inhabiting the remote mountains, capable of shape-shifting and mind control. Could this encounter have been something supernatural, beyond modern science? Skeptics argue the story is a cover for a disastrous military operation, distorted over time by rumor and fear. But the scars, both physical and psychological, on the soldiers don't lie. A few theorists point to the spiral symbol as a key, a sigil used in ancient mysticism, tied to protection or curses. Was the mark a warning, a curse, or a sign of something more sinister? Whatever the truth, the U.S. military's silence has only deepened the mystery. Years later, the truth remains buried beneath layers of classified files and silence. The cave sealed off, the soldiers scattered or silenced, and the official story forgotten. But those who were there, marked by the spiral, haunted by shadows, carry the last known entry of this dark chapter. Is the Giant of Kandahar still out there, watching, waiting? Some nights, near the remnants of that ridge, locals swear they hear a low, guttural growl carried on the wind. A sound not quite animal, not quite human. The mountain keeps its secrets, and some truths, once uncovered, refuse to stay buried. This is the last known entry. The border is a place of shadows. In 2007, a group of U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents encountered something along the Arizona-Mexico border that didn't match any smuggler, cartel member, or lost traveler. What they saw They couldn't be arrested. This is the story of the Wailing Woman encounter, the CBP case that was never meant to reach the light of day. The year was 2007. The setting, a remote stretch of desert terrain near Nogales, Arizona, along the US-Mexico border. It was a place where even experienced CBP officers carried an unease that went beyond the dangers of the job. This region of the Sonoran Desert is infamous for its extremes. Blistering heat by day, bone-deep cold at night, and an eerie, desolate silence broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through dry brush or the distant howl of coyotes. The CBP outpost where the incident originated was modest. A squat prefab building surrounded by razor wire fencing, floodlights, and surveillance towers. Inside, agents rotated in shifts, monitoring motion sensors, drone feeds, and patrolling on foot and in 4x4s. Many who worked in this sector spoke in low tones about strange happenings. Lights in the sky, voices in the wind, sensor alarms with no cause, and tracks that led to nowhere. But most wrote it off as exhaustion, nerves, or desert folklore. However, on the night of August 21st, 2007, something happened that would fracture that line between superstition and reality. It began just after 2:17 a.m., when one of the motion sensors, planted along a narrow arroyo known locally as La Quebrada de las Almas, the Ravine of Souls, was triggered. This wasn't unusual. Migrant groups often passed through that cut, believing it hidden from drones and patrols. But this time, something was different. Drone feeds picked up no heat signatures. Infrared showed nothing moving. And yet, the motion sensor had gone off 3 times in a 5-minute span. A pattern consistent with something pacing or circling. Agent Michael Reyes, a 12-year veteran of the CBP and a former Army scout, was dispatched with 2 others, Agents Liz Contreras and Dale Harmon, to investigate. They left the compound in a blacked-out Jeep Wrangler with night vision rigs and body cams, expecting to find a stranded migrant or coyote scout hiding in the brush. What they found instead defied every explanation. The Jeep rumbled down a dirt trail that twisted along the base of a rocky ridge. The air was dry and still. No moon, no stars. Just the faint glow of the Jeep's instrument panel and the green-tinted world of night vision. At 2:38 a.m., the agents arrived at the coordinates of the triggered motion sensor. It was a narrow gully flanked by thorn brush and jagged limestone. From above, it looked like a wound carved into the earth. They dismounted, scanning the area with NVGs and flashlights. Agent Reyes moved forward alone, following a faint trail of disturbed dirt. Footsteps that appeared bare, human-shaped, but elongated, almost clawed. He radioed the others. Contreras, Harmon, I've got tracks, but they're off, like wrong. You're gonna want to see this. Then the air changed. Reyes later described it as a drop in pressure, like stepping into a sealed chamber. Even through his vest, he could feel a weight on his chest. The desert had gone silent. No wind, no insects, no sound at all. That's when the screaming began. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't an animal. It was something between a woman's wail and a shriek of static, piercing, directionless, echoing off the canyon walls. Reyes dropped to one knee, weapon raised, and shouted back to the team. Then he saw her. 30 feet away, at the mouth of the arroyo, stood a figure. Pale, thin, dripping wet, though there had been no rain in weeks. Her dress hung in tatters, long black hair covered her face. And yet, she wasn't walking. She was hovering. Contreras shouted, "Reyes, fall back!" But by the time she reached him, Reyes was frozen. mumbling words in Spanish that didn't make sense. Old dialect, archaic phrasing. He later said it wasn't his voice, said something was speaking through him. Agent Harmon opened fire. 3 controlled bursts from an M4. Each round passed clean through the figure. No blood, no impact. And then, she vanished. Not ran, not blinked. Gone. The shriek came again, louder from behind them now. The agents turned, weapons raised, but saw nothing. Then the sensor alarm lit up again, and again, and again, as if something was circling them, moving too fast to track. Contreras slammed the radio's emergency frequency. "Dispatch, we need backup. Possibly hostile, non-compliant. Requesting evac now." The line went dead. Every comm device in that canyon shorted out at once. Body cams, encrypted radios, even Harmon's GPS, all gone. They retreated on foot, Reyes half-carried, back to the vehicle. The Jeep's ignition fought them, engine clicking like the battery was dead. Then suddenly the floodlights blasted to life on their own. In that second, they saw it. A face pressed against the passenger window, inches from Harmon. Eyes black, mouth wide, jaw too long to be human. It screamed again, not from its throat, but from inside the Jeep's speakers. Harmon slammed the accelerator. The vehicle roared forward, tearing down the canyon trail until the shadow and sound finally fell away, just before dawn. Back at the base in Nogales, the 3 CBP agents were immediately separated and debriefed. According to leaked internal memos, the interviews were not conducted by Border Patrol superiors, but by individuals in unmarked suits, likely federal intelligence or private contractors. Each agent was asked not only what they saw, but how it made them feel. Questions included: did you feel like you were being watched before the incident? Did the sound continue in your head after the event? Have you dreamt of her since? Agent Reyes was the most shaken. He refused to sleep for 72 hours after the event. When he finally passed out in the infirmary, he awoke screaming in a mix of Latin and archaic Spanish. Nurses reported he scratched the word "maldición" into his forearm with a pen cap. Curse or damnation. In his written statement, Reyes wrote, "It was like drowning in someone else's grief. I could feel her. Sadness, rage. The sound wasn't from her mouth. It was from the air." Agent Harmon, who opened fire, was placed on psychological leave. His last logbook entry, recovered from his issued gear bag, simply read, "She wanted to be seen." That's what it was. A warning, or a memory, or both. Contreras was the only one who maintained composure. But even he couldn't explain what they saw. In a rare off-record comment to a fellow officer weeks later, he said, "The thing that gets me, the footprints, they let us in, but there were none leading out. And that window, it fogged up from the inside. Something was in that Jeep." Following the event, a formal report was filed. The incident was categorized as unexplained anomalous visual and auditory encounter. No hostile engagement, no physical contact, no casualties. But the story didn't end there. 6 months later, Reyes requested a permanent transfer to Vermont, stating he could no longer tolerate the desert air. Harmon resigned altogether, moved off-grid to Idaho. No social presence, no known contact. And Contreras, he stayed. But every year, on the anniversary of that night, he takes 2 days of personal leave. Always the same dates, always unspoken. Officially, the Border Patrol issued no statement about the event. There was no entry in public logs, no media coverage, and no mention in routine activity reports for that sector on the night of October 23, 2007. Unofficially, however, the wheels turned fast. Within 24 hours, 2 black SUVs with no tags entered the Nogales CBP station. The men inside wore suits, not badges. They went directly to the watch commander's office and remained for nearly 3 hours. When they left, all body cam footage, radio logs, and GPS tracking data from Reyes, Harmon, and Contreras' units were sealed under a directive labeled B5 Anomalous Events Protocol, a classification reportedly used only 3 times in that region over the past decade. The damaged patrol vehicle was removed from the yard by flatbed the next day. It was not taken to the CBP garage. Instead, a private trucking contractor hauled it away to an undisclosed facility. The order came not from CBP, but from a Department of Energy satellite office based out of Albuquerque. A strange choice for a patrol car and a shattered rear window. Even stranger, that stretch of Highway 77 where the event occurred was briefly closed 2 nights later for road maintenance. Locals reported no visible work crews, but those who lived near the border checkpoint described odd lights in the sky over the nearby Sonoran Hills. Others claimed their radios and TVs picked up distorted static and wailing sounds, bleeding through normal broadcasts between midnight and 3 a.m. No one could trace the source. A month later, a memo leaked via Secure Drop claimed the incident was flagged and relayed to Northcom, the U.S. Northern Command. The attached analysis listed the event as a Category 4 sensory auditory disruption with psychological contamination potential. The memo warned of repeat exposure resulting in long-term cognitive instability, elevated anxiety response, and potentially cultural hallucinations among susceptible individuals. All further documentation was redacted. The only hint at what happened came from a former CBP mechanic, fired for leaking internal GPS logs years later. When interviewed anonymously, he said, "Whatever they saw, it scared someone with clearance. And when that happens, it vanishes, like the thing never existed. But you know what they say. Just because it ain't on the record doesn't mean it didn't happen. When official records go dark, theories fill the silence." The wailing woman of Highway 77, if that's what she was, has been linked to numerous legends, but none more persistent than the tale of La Llorona, a spirit condemned to wander riversides, eternally mourning her drowned children. But this wasn't near a river, and witnesses described no weeping, only screaming that bypassed the ears and went straight to the brain. Folklorists say Border Patrol agents routinely report strange encounters, from phantom hitchhikers to vanishing figures, but they rarely go public. Many suspect these stories get funneled into internal anomalous event logs, kept separate from criminal or migrant activity. Unofficial black files. Skeptics, of course, argue it was nothing more than a shared hallucination triggered by stress, sleep deprivation, and the desert's harsh elements. But that doesn't explain the warped electronics, the shattered rear window, or the erasure of records, which requires a level of internal coordination far beyond a simple misidentification. Others suggest it was a test, a synthetic psychological warfare experiment, a form of directed energy weaponry or neural disruption tech. But if so, why test it on American federal agents in an uncontrolled environment? Still others point to indigenous folklore, speaking of Yi Naldlushi, skinwalkers, shapeshifters with the power to torment those who trespass sacred land. Though the Navajo Nation does not traditionally associate them with this area of Arizona, spiritual migration stories across the Southwest hint at something deeper, something older. The most unsettling theory? That this wasn't a one-off. that entities like this drift from a battlefield to battlefield, border to border, wherever human suffering resonates like a beacon. And that night, on Highway 77, the beacon was loud. Officially, the event never happened. No case number, no body cam footage, no logbook entry. But if you know where to look, deep in encrypted forums, anonymous whistleblower chats, and late-night AM radio interviews, you'll find traces, a pattern. The 3 agents involved, 2 transferred out within 6 months. 1 retired early due to psychological strain. The Ford Explorer they were driving was taken out of service, scrapped. Mechanics reportedly couldn't explain why the frame had bent inward, as if exposed to intense pressure or force. The onboard dash system had to be physically removed, its motherboard scorched from within, but with no evidence of external heat. And the area itself? Locals say the screams come back, randomly, usually in the early hours before sunrise, sharp, piercing, like someone mourning something too old to remember. One CBP agent who later took over patrols of that sector wrote on a private message board, "Sometimes I think she's still out there, but not waiting, searching for something or someone." The last known entry in any federal record related to that incident is a single line in a corrupted document. Do not respond to distress calls between mile markers 237 and 241. Backup unavailable. Proceed with caution. And just like that, the desert swallowed another secret, and Highway 77 went silent. Some say the file was closed, the report sealed, the witnesses silenced. But every case leaves something behind, a whisper in the dark, a question unanswered. You've just heard the last known entry, and the truth? It's still out there, waiting.